John, what are you doing here? My voice quivered, betraying my shock. Vanessa, still slumming it, I see. Couldn't carve out a better life, huh? John replied, his smirk slicing through my uneasy calm. Standing in the middle of the outlet mall's chaotic maze of sales racks and oblivious shoppers, I felt time collapse around me. John Harris, my ex-husband, my mistake, my ghost, stood before me, as handsome and confident as ever. The years hadn't dulled his arrogance. It's been a long time, I said, summoning every ounce of composure I had left. Seeing him here, of all places, threw me off balance. I wasn't prepared for this confrontation, not at all. 15 years, he corrected, eyes narrowing. And I see you've taken a liking to bargain shopping. His words dripped with disdain. Guess that new husband of yours isn't making enough to spare you from the discount bin. My blood boiled, but I masked it with a forced smile. At least I have someone who doesn't walk out when things get tough. He raised an eyebrow, smirk fading momentarily. Tough? No, just unbearable, he snapped back. But look at you now, a little family of your own. Amazing how things change when you're not holding anyone back. Before I could respond, Greg's voice cut through the tension, warm and reassuring. Hey, Van, Ethan wants to know if we can grab ice cream after this. John's demeanor shifted. Gone was the snide tone and superior attitude. He turned, visibly taken aback by the sight of Greg and our children. I could see him recalibrate, eyes flicking to Ethan and Lily, assessing. Everything all right, honey? Greg asked, eyes flicking to John. Oh, it's just an old acquaintance, I said, hoping the lie wasn't too obvious. Greg Carter, Greg said, extending his hand. Vanessa's husband. John hesitated for a split second before shaking Greg's hand. John Harris, he mumbled. His eyes then landed on Lily and Ethan. Your kids? Yes, this is Lily, I said, patting my daughter on the shoulder. And Ethan. Ethan looked up curiously at John, innocence radiating from him. Hi, mister. John's face softened in a way I hadn't seen before, almost wistful. Then, with a sharp inhale, he collected himself. Nice to meet you all, and this is Oliver, my son. He gestured towards a boy waiting nearby. The resemblance to John was uncanny, but also there was something off, something gnawing at my intuition. Hi, Oliver, Greg greeted kindly. Oliver pulled a polite smile. Vanessa, sensing the strained silence, interjected, We should get going. Kids, say goodbye. As we walked away, I couldn't help but glance back. John stood there, a ghost from my past who somehow still held strings to my present. The chance encounter had rattled me more than I cared to admit. In the car, I took a deep breath. Are you okay? Greg asked softly. I nodded, but my mind raced. The sight of John after all these years, his spiteful words, and then the eeriness of his new family, it left me uneasy, like something darker lurked beneath the surface. This would not be the last time I saw John Harris. And with each encounter, old wounds would reopen and new mysteries would unfold. Even now, a nagging feeling told me that today was just the beginning of something that could change everything. Little did I know, I was right. The drive home was quiet, too quiet. Greg, always quick to sense when something was off, finally broke the silence. You want to talk about it? I sighed, staring out the window at the passing scenery. That was John Harris, I admitted. Greg's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Your ex? Yeah, I mumbled, feeling the words stick in my throat. It brought back a lot of bad memories. Mom, who was that man? Lily asked from the back seat, her innocent curiosity piercing through the tension. Just someone from my past, sweetie. I forced a smile, trying to mask the unease spreading through me. Nothing you need to worry about. When we got home, Greg wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close. We've built a good life, Van. Don't let him drag you back into the past. I nodded, but his words were cold comfort. The encounter with John hung over me like a dark cloud. I needed to focus on what I had now: Greg, Lily, Ethan. That night, after the kids went to bed, I lay next to Greg in the dark, memories of the past washing over me. John leaving abruptly, his cutting words about my inability to have children echoing in my mind. 15 years ago, John had shattered my world. We were struggling with infertility treatments, each failed attempt driving a wedge between us. One day he just packed his bags and left, as if 10 years of marriage meant nothing. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee, Greg joined me. You seem far away, he observed gently. Just thinking about everything, I replied. Seeing John stirred up a lot. I paused, the memory of John's son, Oliver, flashing in my mind. There was something about him, something I couldn't shake. You know, it's okay to feel uneasy, Greg said, placing a comforting hand over mine. But remember, whatever happens, we face it together. Later that day, I picked up Lily and Ethan from school. As they chatted about their day, I couldn't help but notice Oliver at the gate, waiting for his ride. His resemblance to John was undeniable, but there was something more. "Mom, can Oliver come over for a play date?" Ethan asked, bringing me back to the moment. "Maybe someday, honey," I replied, my gaze still fixed on Oliver. Back home, I busied myself with chores, but my mind kept drifting back to John's cruel words and Hannah's apparent betrayal. How could someone so vile still have such a hold on me? Greg noticed my distraction. "Van, you're doing it again," he said softly. "Doing what?" "Letting John get to you," he replied, lifting my chin so I met his eyes. "That man doesn't deserve another second of your thoughts." He was right. I needed to focus on my family, on the present, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave me. John's sudden appearance, those pointed remarks, it all felt like a warning, a sign that the past wasn't done with me yet. I decided that evening, as I tucked Lily and Ethan into bed, that I couldn't let John's reappearance unsettle our lives. But the questions lingered. What had really happened with John after he left? What secrets was he hiding now? Greg kissed me goodnight, his unwavering support a beacon in my stormy thoughts. "We'll get through this, Van, just like we always have." As I drifted to sleep, I resolved to uncover the truth about John's new life. Whatever it took, I owed it to myself and my family to finally put the past to rest. I decided to take Lily and Ethan to the park over the weekend. Greg joined us as we tried to enjoy a peaceful family day. It worked for the most part, but every now and then my mind wandered back to John and his biting remarks. As the kids played on the swings, Greg squeezed my hand. "You're thinking about him again, aren't you?" I sighed. "I can't help it, Greg. There's something that just doesn't sit right." Just then, we heard an all-too-familiar voice. "Fancy seeing you here, Vanessa." I turned to see John, his smirk ever present. His new wife, Hannah, stood beside him, looking impeccable, but holding an air of coldness. "John," I acknowledged stiffly. "Hannah. Enjoying family time?" John scoffed, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "It's cute, really." Hannah sized me up with a glance. "I see you've moved on quickly after him." "Yes, I have a wonderful family now," I said firmly, hoping to end the conversation. Oliver, playing nearby, ran over to join Ethan on the swings. Yet I couldn't help but notice Hannah keeping a close watch on him, almost protectively. John's gaze landed on Greg. "You must have a lot of patience to deal with her," he sneered. "Actually, Vanessa is amazing," Greg retorted, his voice calm. "I'm the lucky one here." John barked a laugh. "Amazing, right? Too bad she was barren and old for me." Greg shot up from the bench. "Watch your mouth, Harris." Hannah put a hand on John's arm, trying to pull him back. "John, not here." But John shrugged her off, stepping closer to us. "Why should I? Vanessa needs to hear the truth. She failed as a wife, and she knows it." The anger in Greg's eyes matched the fury rising in my chest. "That's enough," I said, my voice low but steady. "We're not your punching bags anymore." As if on cue, Ethan ran over, followed by Oliver. "Mom, can Oliver come to our house sometime?" Before I could respond, Hannah interjected. "I don't think that's a good idea, Oliver." John glared at her, then back at me. "Yes, Oliver. Wouldn't want him around your bad influence, Vanessa." "Enough!" I shouted, startling everyone, including myself. "This petty need to belittle me in front of my family. It's pathetic, John." Greg stepped between us, facing John. "You heard her. Stay away from us." John's eyes glinted with a twisted sort of satisfaction. He relished getting under my skin. Hannah pulled John away finally, giving me one last disdainful look. "Keep your distance," she warned. As they walked away, I felt Greg's arms around me, grounding me. "We won't let him get to us," he whispered. "I promise." "But he did get to us," I said quietly, watching Oliver look back at us curiously. There was more to John's life now, more I needed to uncover. His smugness, his nasty comments, they were hiding something. Back home, I shared my thoughts with Greg as we sat on the porch. John's changed, but not for the better. Something's not right in his world. Greg nodded. "Then we find out what it is. We do it together." In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. John's vile nature and the mysterious family dynamic gnawed at me. I needed to discover the truth, not just for me, but for my family's peace. Whatever secrets John was hiding, I would uncover them, with or without his permission. The days after our park encounter passed in a blur. My mind kept drifting back to the final, miserable days of my marriage to John. The memory of endless infertility treatments dominated my thoughts, each failed attempt pulling us further apart until John eventually snapped. "Vanessa," he had said back then, his voice cold and distant, "I can't do this anymore. I need more from life than this endless cycle of disappointment." "But we can adopt," I had pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "We can still have a family." He had just shaken his head, packing his bags. "You're barren and old, Vanessa. You can't give me what I need. I am done." Now, 15 years later, I leaned on the kitchen counter, staring blankly into my coffee cup. Greg noticed me zoning out again and slid beside me, gently rubbing my back. "Today's the day, you know." "Day for what?" "For focusing on our current life. I thought maybe a picnic at the lake would be good." I nodded, trying to push the past away. "Sounds great." Greg, Lily, Ethan, and I packed up and drove to the lake, our temporary escape. The kids ran ahead, laughing and playing, while we spread out the blanket and picnic basket. As I watched my children, I felt a sense of peace. Greg sat down beside me, handing me a sandwich. "Remember, we're here now. This is what matters." I smiled, grateful for his support. My thoughts, however, kept creeping back to John's haunting words and Oliver's eerie resemblance to his mother, Hannah. After lunch, while the kids skipped stones along the water, I turned to Greg. "You know, I can't help but think there's something more going on with John." Greg sighed, clearly aware I wasn't going to let this rest. "If it's really bothering you, maybe it's time we dig a little deeper. But do it carefully, Van. The last thing we need is more drama." I nodded, relieved to have his support. "Yeah, carefully." Over the next few weeks, I started piecing things together, reaching out to old contacts discreetly. Conversations with mutual acquaintances revealed John's troubled financial history and erratic behavior. Hannah's pristine social media posts painted a different picture. Her life seemed too perfect, too curated. One afternoon, as I was picking up the kids from school, I saw John's car parked outside. He was talking to Oliver, his expression tense. I caught snippets of their conversation. "I told you to stay away from them," John snapped. "But Dad, Ethan's my friend," Oliver protested, looking confused. "You don't need friends like them," John hissed, eyes darting around as if afraid someone might overhear. "John," I called out, walking towards them. "Is there a problem?" John's face twisted with anger. "Stay out of this, Vanessa. Why do you always have to be so mean?" Oliver shot back at his father before running off towards the school gate, tears in his eyes. "Nice parenting," I scoffed. "Back off, Vanessa. My family's none of your business," he spat. I looked him square in the eye. "When you drag my family into your mess, it becomes my business." John stormed off, leaving me with a growing sense of unease. Clearly, things weren't as perfect in his new life as he wanted everyone to believe. But what was he hiding? That evening, I confided in Greg everything I had observed. "There's something deeply wrong going on here. I can feel it." "We'll find out what it is," Greg reassured. "Step by step, we'll uncover the truth." And so, amidst happy family moments and unsettling encounters, the pursuit of truth began. John's scornful comments, Hannah's guarded nature, and the visible strain within their family reinforced my determination. Whatever lies were buried in John's new life, I would dig them up, and he would finally face the consequences. The next week, I finally opened up to Greg about my plan. "Greg, I think we need to investigate John further. I can't shake the feeling that he's hiding something really big." Greg leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "All right, Vanessa. How do you want to start?" "My accounting skills can be useful here. Maybe I'll dig into his finances, look for any irregularities. Can you see if you've got any contacts who could help figure out what he's been up to?" Greg nodded, determination etched on his face. "We'll get to the bottom of this." Using old connections, Greg reached out to a private investigator he knew, while I began sifting through public records, tax filings, anything linked to John and Hannah. A few days later, with stacks of paperwork spread out on the dining table, I felt my first breakthrough approaching. "Greg, look here," I said, pointing to a document. "There's a company registered under Hannah's name that John seemed to funnel money into regularly. Why would he do that?" Greg looked it over and frowned. "That's odd. Maybe it's a front for something." "Possibly," I agreed. "But what?" The weekend gave us the chance to focus even more. I think we should visit some of these addresses linked to the company, Greg suggested. It was late afternoon when we found ourselves outside a dilapidated warehouse. It felt like a scene from a movie, quiet, almost too quiet. We walked around the building, looking for anything unusual. As we turned a corner, we spotted John arguing with a rough-looking man. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" the man growled. "Back off, Larry. This isn't your business," John snapped. "It is when you owe me," Larry shot back, their voices getting louder. Greg pulled out his phone and started recording discreetly. I watched, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. Before we could gather more, John and Larry left, their argument echoing in the empty space. Back in the car, my heart raced. "Did you get that?" I asked Greg. "Every word," he said, showing me the recording. "Why's he dealing with shady people?" "I don't know, but we're getting closer," I said. Over the next few days, things got more complicated. The investigator Greg contacted found something crucial. John had a vasectomy years ago, meaning he couldn't have fathered Oliver. This revelation hit me like a truck. "Greg, this changes everything," I said, shocked by the news. Greg's face hardened. "We have to confront them. This is bigger than we thought." So, preparations began for an upcoming alumni event where we knew John and Hannah would be present. Greg printed out documents confirming the vasectomy, and I prepared myself for a public showdown. I spent evenings rehearsing what to say, fluctuating between anger and determination. Greg stayed close, his support unwavering. "Remember, you're doing this for the truth," he reminded me. Finally, the night of the event arrived. My heart pounded as we approached the venue, arm in arm. Spotting John and Hannah, we headed straight for them. "Vanessa, Greg, what a surprise," Hannah said, her smile tight. "We need to talk," I declared, voice steady but loud enough to draw attention. John's eyes narrowed. "What now?" Greg pulled out the documents and handed them to John. "Explain this," he demanded. John's face turned white, his bravado crumbling. "You've been spying on me?" "Truth has a way of coming out," I said evenly. "What do you have to say, John?" The room grew silent, everyone's eyes on us. Hannah's face turned crimson as she understood what was happening. The web of lies and deceit was unraveling right before them, and there was no stopping it now. The truth about Oliver's parentage, John's vasectomy, and the financial irregularities, all exposed in public. As John faltered, trying to regain control, Hannah's tears and sputtered excuses sounded like hollow echoes in the room, filled with stunned silence. This confrontation was just a step in uncovering the deeper truth, but it was necessary. As we walked away, leaving the shocked crowd and shattered reputations behind, I felt a weight lift. The past no longer shackled me. Now I was ready to face whatever came next. The air was thick with tension as the whispers started, eyes glued to the scene unfolding in front of them. John stood there, hands shaking, holding the documents we just handed him. His attempt to maintain composure was failing miserably. "What is this?" he stammered, glancing at the papers and then back at me. I crossed my arms, feeling a sense of vindication. "It's proof, John. Proof of your lies. You had a vasectomy years ago. You couldn't have fathered Oliver." Hannah's face turned pale as she tried to pull John away. "This isn't the place for such accusations," she hissed. "Then, when is the right time, Hannah?" I shot back, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe you should explain how Oliver came to be." The crowd around us grew larger, their curiosity tinged with judgment. John swallowed hard, anger replacing his initial shock. "You've gone too far, Vanessa." "Too far?" I laughed bitterly. "You're the one who left me, who lied and cheated. This is just the truth coming out, John." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next bomb to drop. Greg, standing beside me, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We're not backing down, John. The facade ends here." With a burst of arrogance, John attempted to regain control. "This doesn't prove anything. You can't destroy me with baseless accusations." I met his gaze, and for the first time, I saw fear lurking behind his anger. "It's not baseless. We had a private investigator look into it. We have the proof. You're a fraud, John." Hannah broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this," she cried, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." The realization hit John like a ton of bricks. He turned to Hannah, his eyes wide with betrayal. "You knew?" Hannah nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I thought I could make it work, that you wouldn't find out." John's rage boiled over. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "You and your lies." I took a step forward, looking directly at Hannah. "Why, Hannah? Why lie about a child's parentage?" She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted a family. I knew John wouldn't stay if he knew the truth." The room gasped, the weight of her confession hanging heavily in the air. Oliver, standing at the edge of the crowd, looked between John and Hannah, confusion and hurt etched on his young face. "Oliver," I called gently, "come here, honey." He hesitated, but then walked towards me, his eyes searching mine for answers. "Is this true?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I knelt down, my heart breaking for him. "It is, and I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." John turned to me, his voice low and dangerous. "You've destroyed my family. Are you happy now?" My answer was steady and resolute. "No, John. You destroyed it with your lies. I just revealed the truth." Greg stepped in, pointing to the pile of evidence. "We'll make sure everyone knows the truth, John. You can't hide behind lies anymore." As John and Hannah stood there, broken and exposed, Greg and I turned to leave. The whispers followed us out, the fallout of the confrontation spreading like wildfire. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of closure. Back in the car, I took a deep breath. "It's over," I said, a mix of relief and sadness washing over me. Greg squeezed my hand. "It's over, and we did the right thing." Looking back at the venue, I knew the road ahead would still have challenges. But for now, the truth had prevailed. And that was enough. We drove home, ready to face whatever came next, together. We had barely stepped into the house when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was Mary, an old friend from college who had been at the alumni event. "Vanessa, what happened tonight?" "Everyone's talking about it," she said, her voice a mix of shock and curiosity. "It's a long story, Mary. Just know that John's finally been exposed for who he really is," I replied, my voice more exhausted than triumphant. "You did the right thing. I always knew there was something off about him," she said before we wrapped up the call. I sank into the couch, feeling the weight of the evening lift slightly. Greg brought over 2 cups of tea and sat down beside me. "It's not over, you know," Greg said gently. "John's not just going to go quietly." "I know," I replied, "but we'll face it together." The next morning, I found messages waiting for me, some supportive, others prying for more details. The town buzzed with gossip, and I prepped myself for the fallout. Greg took the kids out for breakfast while I tackled emails and phone calls. Just as I was wrapping up, there was a loud knock on the door. I opened it to see John, looking disheveled but still defiant. "We need to talk," he growled. "Fine," I responded, letting him in. "But I'm not going to be bullied in my own home, John." He paced the living room, his agitation palpable. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you? You had to dig up crap to ruin me." "You ruined yourself, John," I said, standing firm. "I just made sure the truth came out." "You've taken everything from me. My career, my reputation, my family," he shouted, his face turning red. "Your lies are what took those things," I replied, my voice calm but strong. "You did this to yourself." His eyes narrowed as he leaned closer. "You think this is over? I'll make sure you regret this." "Leave," I said coldly. "Now." He glared at me but turned to leave, slamming the door behind him. Greg and the kids returned shortly after. I didn't want to alarm them, so I kept the conversation light while Greg read the tension in my face. Later, when the kids were in their rooms, I filled him in on John's visit. "We need to be careful," Greg said, his concern evident. "John's desperate, and desperate people do desperate things." Days passed with John's threatening words lingering in my mind. Then, one evening, I noticed a car tailing me on my way home from work. My heart raced, but I tried to stay calm, taking different routes until I lost them. At home, I shared my concerns with Greg. "Someone was following me today. I'm sure of it." Greg frowned. "We'll need to be more cautious. I'll call the investigator and see if he can help." True to his word, Greg arranged extra security measures while I coordinated with the investigator. Evidence and paternity tests were filed, safeguarding our position. A week later, the investigators' findings revealed more of John's dealings, financial fraud, illicit business ties, and much more. We compiled the evidence, preparing for the storm that was sure to follow. With legal protection in place, Greg and I met with an attorney to discuss the next steps. "Given the evidence, we can press charges against John," the attorney explained. But this could get messy, especially with the public exposure. We're prepared for that, I said firmly. He needs to face the consequences. Back at home, I prepared dinner while Greg helped the kids with their homework. It was a brief moment of normalcy, a reminder of what I was fighting to protect. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from the attorney, detailing the initial steps for the case. I shared the news with Greg, who looked both concerned and relieved. We're in for a long fight, he said, wrapping an arm around me, but we'll make it through, together. Watching Lily and Ethan at the dining table, I felt a sense of renewed determination. John's downfall wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting my family and ensuring they knew integrity and truth had a place in our lives. And so, with the calm before the legal storm, we steeled ourselves for the battle ahead, unified and unyielding in our pursuit of justice. The courtroom was silent, except for the hum of tense whispers. John sat across from us, his face a mask of defiance, while Hannah fidgeted beside him, her eyes red from crying. Greg squeezed my hand, a silent reminder that we were in this together. The judge called the session to order, and our attorney rose to present the case. Your Honor, we have compelling evidence showing financial fraud, manipulative behavior, and the falsification of paternity. As the evidence was laid out, document by document, John's composure faltered. His attorney tried to object, but the judge allowed the presentation to continue. The room held its breath as the details of John's deceit unraveled. Hannah broke down during her testimony. I didn't know what else to do. John demanded perfection, and I was terrified he'd leave if I told the truth about Oliver. John shot her a look of pure venom. You're pathetic, he spat. The judge banged his gavel. Order in the court. After hours of testimonies, the judge adjourned the session, announcing a ruling the next day. The tension was palpable as we left the courtroom. Outside, Greg pulled me into a supportive hug. We've done everything we can, Van, he whispered. I know, now we wait. That night, sleep was a distant friend. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. Greg's steady breathing beside me was a small comfort. Tomorrow would bring closure, one way or another. Morning came quickly. As we drove to the courthouse, my heart pounded with anticipation. Back in the courtroom, the judge entered, looking stern. After careful deliberation, the court finds the defendant, John Harris, guilty on multiple counts of fraud and deceit. Custodial rights over Oliver are hereby contested, pending further investigation. John's face crumpled, his arrogance replaced by panic. He stood up, pointing at me. This is your fault, Vanessa. You and your vendetta. I stood my ground. No, John. This is the consequence of your actions. You did this to yourself. As the court officers escorted John and Hannah out, a sense of immense relief washed over me. We had won. The truth had prevailed. Outside, the sun shone brightly. Greg hugged me tightly, and the kids ran up, their innocent faces asking if everything was finally over. Yes, it's over, I said, smiling through tears. We're free. In the days that followed, the legal battles continued over Oliver's custody. John's reputation was shattered, leaving him scrambling to pick up the pieces of his once dominant life. Greg and I focused on our family, making sure Lily and Ethan felt safe and loved. Despite the turmoil, we found moments of peace. One evening, as we sat on the porch, I noticed Oliver approaching our house, looking hesitant. Vanessa? He asked, his voice small. Yes, Oliver. Can I stay here for a bit, with you and your family? Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at Greg, who nodded. Of course, you can, I said, opening my arms to him. Our family welcomed Oliver with open hearts. Over time, he became part of our lives, finding stability and care among us. The scars left by John's manipulation slowly healed, replaced by the bonds we formed together. Through the chaos, we emerged stronger, bound by truth and love. As we watched the kids play in the yard, Greg held me close, whispering, We did it. Yes, I whispered back, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and hope. We did. With John's downfall behind us and our family closer than ever, we faced the future, knowing that we had overcome the shadows of the past. Our story was one of resilience, proof that no matter how dark the times, light could always break through. And so we moved forward, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. How could you do this to me? I shouted, my voice echoing in our cavernous foyer. Dean stood impassively, almost bored, as I confronted him. Behind him, my 17-year-old stepson, Caleb, smirked. Come on, Alana, Dean drawled. Stop with the hysterics. We both know this marriage was a business arrangement. I needed access to your money, and you wanted the status of being a corporate wife. I recoiled as if struck. A business arrangement? Is that all our decade together meant to you? Oh, please, he scoffed. You really bought into the whole till death do us part fairy tale? I enjoyed the lifestyle you provided, but now your well has apparently run dry. His words knocked the wind from my sails. I had just endured the most embarrassing board meeting of my career after a failed project cost the company millions. My job was now on shaky ground. But looking into my husband's cold, greedy eyes, I realized the difficult day at work paled in comparison to the bomb Dean just dropped on our marriage. Caleb, sweetie, talk some sense into your father, I pleaded to my stepson. He just glared and shook his head. Sorry, Alana, but I'm with Dad on this one. We heard from our country club friends that you lost your big inheritance. So if you don't have money anymore, what use do we have for you? The casual cruelty stunned me. It was then that the truth hit me like a splash of frigid water. My carefully curated life had all been a fragile house of cards. One breath of ill financial fortune was apparently enough to blow it all down. Rage and adrenaline stirred my shock into action. If cold hard cash was all that mattered to them, so be it. Get out, I hissed through gritted teeth. Confusion flashed across Dean's face. You can't kick me out of my own house. The hell I can't, I cut him off. This is my name on the mortgage, remember? You wanted access to my good credit for this palace, and since all you care about is money, consider our little business arrangement terminated. I marched over to the front door and held it open. I'll expect you both to be gone by morning. My attorney will deliver the divorce papers next week. Dean's lip curled derisively. You'll regret this, Alana. I stepped forward until we were nose to nose. The only thing I regret is wasting years of my life on a shallow, greedy coward like you. Now get out before I have you removed. For a second, Dean stared at me incredulously. Then, with a final sneer, he brushed past me out the door, Caleb trailing obediently behind. As soon as the door slammed shut, the adrenaline fueling my bravado evaporated. With shaking hands, I slid down the wall until I collapsed in an undignified heap, ragged sobs tearing from my throat. Rock bottom. After years of tirelessly climbing the corporate ladder, here I was, job in jeopardy, marriage in tatters, alone in this echoing mausoleum I used to call home. Used to being the operative phrase, because tomorrow I would start over. Rebuild. As I laid there taking stock of my new circumstances, the tears slowly dried to a hard, glittering determination. Dean and Caleb wanted to play dirty? Game on. If all they valued was net worth and public image, then consider the gauntlet thrown down. I vowed then and there to attain the kind of success they could only dream of. And once I did, I would make them regret the day they betrayed the wrong woman. The best revenge would be rising from the ashes of their callous dismissal like a phoenix. Yes, there would be sweet vindication in proving I didn't need them or their conditional affection. My worth was not defined by men who saw me as nothing more than a bank account. I would build something spectacular without them, and one day in the not-so-distant future, I would relish getting to slam the door in their faces when they inevitably came crawling back. I awoke the next morning feeling hollow and numb, the events of the previous night flooding back in a miserable wave. Dean and Caleb were gone. My fairy tale life had crumbled with staggering swiftness. As I shuffled to the kitchen to brew some liquid fortification, I passed Dean's home office. The door was ajar, and I paused, seeing the velvet ring box atop a stack of financial papers on his desk. My fingers shook slightly as I opened it to reveal the substantial diamond solitaire he had given me on our 5th anniversary. A knock at the front door jolted me from my reverie. My attorney had arrived with the divorce papers as promised. As we sat signing the documents that dissolved a decade together, I recounted the details of Dean and Caleb's ugly betrayal. My attorney's shrewd eyes narrowed. "We'll make sure this divorce is quick and quiet," she assured me. "Dean's business can't afford the negative publicity right now with that discrimination lawsuit pending against him. We'll get you favorable terms, I guarantee it." I nodded numbly, barely listening. None of it seemed to matter much anymore beyond a means to swiftly sever all remaining ties. Over the next few weeks, getting back on my feet financially became my prime focus out of necessity. The legal proceedings were moving at a brisk clip, just as my attorney had promised. Soon the day arrived when I came home one evening to see my possessions strewn haphazardly about the front lawn. Dean had clearly wasted no time reclaiming the house that was now awarded to him in the settlement, despite my name and credit on the line for it. My jewelry, designer shoes, and other valuables were nowhere to be seen. Undoubtedly already hawked by Dean in his desperate bid for liquidity to prop up his struggling business. Once a greedy opportunist, always a greedy opportunist, I mused bitterly. As the moving truck packed up my clothes and lone pieces of intact furniture to take to my new small apartment, I stood across the street staring numbly at the only home I had known for over a decade now, occupied by strangers. "You brought this on yourself, Alana," said the voice in my head that sounded disturbingly like Dean. "This is what happens when you don't take care of those loyal to you." An icy rage stirred in my gut. "Oh, don't worry, Dean," I thought venomously. "You'll soon see exactly what happens when you betray someone like me. I vow to rise from these ashes and regain everything I lost 100-fold without you. Just you wait, you reptile. My day of redemption will come." Over the next year, I shed everything about my old life: the luxury clothes and cars, the country club memberships, the circle of wealthy friends and socialites. I funneled all time and energy into resuscitating my career, slowly regaining my standing. Meanwhile, Dean's downward spiral continued as his business crumbled under the weight of discrimination lawsuits and increasingly poor leadership. Last I heard, he sold his Mercedes to cover payroll and moved into a small rental apartment much like mine. As for Caleb, the golden child, without my financial largesse, he had to withdraw from his Ivy League college dreams only one semester in. Dean could no longer afford even community college tuition. The updates on my erstwhile family's misfortune arrived via mutual contacts still in our social orbit. I received the news of their troubles with cool indifference. The scales of justice seemed to finally be balancing. My climb upward would soon intersect their fall. And intercept them I shall. I resolved anew each morning. My starved inner phoenix will feast on the ashes of their hubris soon enough. The pre-dawn light filtered into my Spartan apartment bedroom as my alarm blared. Just another day in my new reality. Divorced, financially rebuilding, career on the ropes. But today was different. Today was the launch presentation for Project Helix, the brainchild I had tirelessly devoted myself to over the past 18 months since the implosion of my marriage. Its revolutionary genetic testing algorithms for cancer diagnostics represented my professional phoenix rising from the ashes. I had handpicked a brilliant team and leveraged every business connection and favor accumulated in my long career to secure funding and top lab partners. Everything was on the line today: my reputation, my finances, my future. As I gazed steadfastly at my reflection in the mirror getting ready, the familiar icy determination settled into my bones, fueling every movement. My resolve hardened into an impenetrable shield. Today signaled a new beginning on every level. The presentation was a resounding success, garnering impressive investor commitments and glowing media coverage. As I shook hands afterwards, secure in the revival of both my career and bank account, I caught sight of Dean across the room. Our eyes locked. He looked older, paunchier, dressed in an ill-fitting rental suit. An ugly scowl marred Caleb's once handsome face beside him. Dean raised his glass mockingly in my direction before turning away. I smiled to myself as I networked with enthusiastic potential partners, no longer bothering to glance back at the shadows of my past life. Today was sweet vindication, the fruits of my labors on proud display. My ascension was just beginning, and his fading relevance was now an afterthought. Onward and upward. Over the ensuing months, Project Helix rapidly became the cornerstone of a biotech startup funded by blue-chip investors. As CEO, stock options and a 7-figure salary quickly put me back in the black. Meanwhile, Dean was forced by creditors into bankruptcy and had to sell what few remaining assets he still possessed, including my treasured 5-carat anniversary ring, as I discovered. The business discrimination lawsuits had utterly destroyed his professional reputation. No one wanted to hire, fund, or work with someone so toxic. His fall from grace was almost complete. Caleb scraped by doing odd jobs, his Ivy League dreams replaced by the reality of community college dropout. How the mighty had fallen. Their crumbling fortunes were of only passing interest to me at this point. My star was rising to stratospheric new heights as industry accolades and magazine covers continued rolling in. I stayed laser-focused on nurturing this hard-earned success. My technology was gaining global recognition as a game-changer in oncology testing. As billions in potential market capitalization hung ripe for the taking, acquisition offers from all the pharma giants flooded my inbox, but I remained unmoved. My ambitions were far grander than cashing out now, like so many flash-in-the-pan biotech startups. I would build an empire that left no doubt as to my formidable talent and grit, a lasting legacy that no spoiled opportunist could ever wrest from my grip. As Project Helix's national rollout neared completion, I sensed my hour of sweet redemption was nigh. The day of reckoning I had nurtured like a smoldering ember these past miserable years. Soon I would confront the faithless parasites that derailed my life with such callous indifference. Dean and Caleb would finally behold with their own eyes what steely determination can manifest when someone with my tenacity puts her mind to a worthy purpose. The time had come at last to reopen that ugly chapter and slam it shut for good on my terms. My ascension was irrefutable, my rivals vanquished. Now to deliver the final blow that would humble them completely before my might and resolve. Soon, my old acquaintances would see that I was not defeated as presumed. No, I had returned, consulted, feared, and admired. My time had come again in spades. The game wasn't over, but the rules were about to change. Dean and Caleb would learn that to their sorrow soon enough. The phoenix had risen triumphant from the ashes they left. Now it was their turn to burn. I straightened my emerald silk blazer as I strode confidently into the soaring lobby of Prisma Laboratories. Today's meetings represented the culmination of intense negotiations for them to acquire a majority stake in my booming startup. On paper, I was selling control, but in reality, I would still lead operations with significant autonomy guaranteed in my contract. And the 9-figure payout would make me one of the wealthiest self-made female biotech entrepreneurs in history. Over the next few hours, I fielded complex questions from their executive team and arbitrated key deal points with my signature sharp focus. This was the crowning moment. My resurgence was almost complete. As Prisma's CEO reached across the glossy boardroom table to shake my hand in front of the approving audience, solidifying our pact, a surge of elation flooded my system. I had manifested the seemingly impossible. Risen from the ashes by virtue of grit alone, my attorney Arma Snyder-eyed me keenly as the noise died down. "Well played, Alana. They never saw you coming," she remarked approvingly. "This has been quite the turnaround from when we first met to dissolve your marriage. You're at the top again." I nodded, a small smile playing about my lips as I gazed out the soaring windows to the city below. Yes, indeed. And I must admit, while the professional achievement is profoundly gratifying, I'm also anticipating finally confronting lingering ghosts from my past very soon. Snyder's arched an eyebrow. "I assume you're referring to Dean Turner? I understand he's hit desperate times since your split. Word is he may even face criminal fraud charges soon regarding his business dealings." "Well, karma can be a real witch sometimes, can't she?" I replied breezily. "As for my dear ex, let's just say I have an important announcement about my recent windfall event that I intend to make very public soon. Dean always did covet the spotlight." As we gathered our things, Snyder paused thoughtfully. "You know, Alana, living well is truly the best revenge, as the saying goes. Dean and your stepson already face more struggles than they can manage by the looks of things. But the choice is yours." I held her gaze unflinchingly. "I appreciate your counsel, but I've come much too far and endured too much pain to not savor this moment. The time has come for the final reckoning." Over the next few days, I arranged an elite catered event at my sleek new downtown penthouse, ostensibly to celebrate the acquisition deal. But my real purpose was setting the stage for the final act of my vengeance upon Dean and Caleb. I made a point to conspicuously invite various old common contacts I knew would relay news back to Dean in short order. As expected, word soon reached my ex about the extravagant party and my massive windfall payout. I learned from my well-connected event planner that Dean was in a state of incredulous anguish upon hearing of my spectacular phoenix-like rise from the ashes. Predictably, he and Caleb instantly attempted to contact me, pleading for reconciliation now that my coffers had swelled again. But I simply blocked their increasingly desperate calls and messages without a second glance. My focus remained fixed solely on the upcoming spectacle I had carefully orchestrated for their final humiliation. The evening was perfect. Flexing my newly restored elite social status among powerful biotech nobility was profoundly gratifying. The catering was sublime, the champagne exquisite, the guest list exclusive. My couture silk dress attracted envious stares. Around midnight, Dean appeared uninvited at the door, attempting to charm his way past security. But I simply requested his forcible removal from the premises without bothering to leave my conversation circle. Soon, this whole ugly chapter plaguing me these last few torturous years could finally be laid to rest. My redemption song was nearly complete, needing only one last triumphant note. The time had come for my fortunes to irrevocably eclipse those who wrongly assumed I was finished. Tomorrow night, Dean and Caleb would comprehend the magnitude of their folly at long last. I would relish revealing how I prevailed while they crumbled. Vengeance would at last be mine in full measure. I surveyed the ballroom with pride, the elegant space glowing under crystal chandeliers. Tonight represented the pinnacle, the culminating spectacle during which I would regain control of the narrative that Dean and Caleb tried to write when dismissing me as irrelevant. False narratives have consequences, and tonight, before all the eyes of the elite circle they once traveled in, my adversaries would pay the ultimate price for their vain hubris. From behind the velvet curtain, I glimpsed familiar faces in the growing crowd. Socialites and industry titans whose circles once provided my daily sustenance mingled over cocktails. Soon they would all witness my astonishing rise from the ashes after barely hiding their schadenfreude over my supposed downfall not so long ago. A hush fell over the glamorous crowd as the lights dimmed. Then spotlights illuminated the stage where I stood resplendent in a beaded evening gown specially commissioned for the occasion. I savored the sudden shock rippling through the room. Indeed, rumors of my demise had been greatly exaggerated. Esteemed friends, colleagues, and supporters, welcome to this momentous night. My voice echoed confidently through the silent ballroom. I am beyond delighted so many familiar faces are here to help me celebrate recent events, which I shall disclose momentarily. First, a bit of context. I proceeded to recount my spectacular professional turnaround, born out of grit and vision when all seemed lost. Murmurs of surprise rippled through those who assumed bankruptcy and ruin following my brutal divorce and near-career implosion. And so it is with immense pride that I can now announce that Project Helix, my labor of love these past few years, has officially been acquired by Prisma Laboratories for a sum that shall propel my new firm, Turner Biologics, into the stratosphere. An astonished gasp went up from the audience, followed by a thunderous standing ovation as Dean's ashen face stared up at me in disbelief from the third row, Caleb shrinking behind him. The room roared with applause while my enemies grappled with this shocking public spectacle, revealing the scale of their gross misjudgment. I raised a hand and continued after the cheers died down, my voice ringing with conviction throughout the silent grandeur of the ballroom. My friends, you all saw me endure grievous betrayal and the loss of everything I held dear not so long ago. And yet here I stand before you stronger than ever, beholden to no one. My fortunes risen higher than my adversaries could have conceived. I allowed the dramatic words to sink in as hundreds of rapt gazes flickered between me on stage and Dean squirming in discomfort below. Let my astonishing journey serve as proof that integrity and grit conquer all. Much was taken from me, but now I have recovered my wealth and status 100-fold, while my enemies sink ever lower. Murmurs rippled through the ballroom as all eyes turned on Dean and Caleb. I let the discomfort stretch unbearably as camera phones immortalized their humiliation. Finally, I concluded, "Remember, friends, no matter how dark the night, the righteous phoenix shall always rise again, more glorious than before. Our setbacks oft serve but to propel our destiny higher than imagined if we but persevere." The ballroom erupted in a standing ovation as I soaked in my hard-won public vindication. Justice had been served at long last before all. Now closure could finally liberate me to chart wondrous new horizons unencumbered by the phantoms of past treachery. My revival was now irrefutably complete. As guests swarmed forward with praise and adulation, a strong hand gripped my elbow. I turned to see Caleb's eyes brimming with fury inches from mine. "You vindictive witch! We offered reconciliation, but you repaid our regrets with this spectacle?" He spat contemptuously before security pulled him back. I calmly held his baleful gaze. "The time for reconciliation ended when you threw me away believing you had broken me. Consider this long overdue payment for your arrogance." His glare spoke daggers before security removed him, but instead of satisfaction, unexpectedly I felt only a growing hollowness expanding in my chest. Because gazing into that warped face oozing vitriol, I glimpsed a mirror image, and felt the arms of my gleaming victory turn cold and leaden. I awoke the morning after my spectacular vindication gala, feeling hungover in more ways than one. While the champagne may have faded, the confrontation with Caleb still echoed unpleasantly in my mind. His rage and contempt was a mirror I could no longer avoid. In seeking to prove myself above their petty manipulations, had I instead lowered myself to their emotional wasteland by stooping to excess vengeance? You reap what you sow, Alana. What crops are now ripening from the seeds of bitterness and spite you've sown these past few years? I pushed the uneasy thoughts aside as I prepared for a series of major media interviews about the gala revelations. Prisma's publicity team would be leveraging the sensational arc of my comeback story as a boost for their newly acquired biotech crown jewel. Over the next few weeks, dozens of glossy magazine profiles and cable news segments broadcast the comeback queen's astonishing journey from a broken divorcee to self-made female billionaire. I should have felt only jubilation at this hard-won validation. But as I politely fielded invasive personal questions about Dean's betrayal and my Cinderella redemption, feelings of unease continued swelling steadily. Celebrity anonymity and the consolation of wealth could not fully dull the growing spiritual crisis born that night. I witnessed my own reflection in Caleb's contorted face. One morning, as I absently surveyed the impressive view from my sleek new corner office, my executive assistant announced an unexpected visitor, my old friend and attorney, Carla Snyder. As we exchanged awkward pleasantries over my exotic imported tea, I sensed this was more than a congratulatory visit. Her smile faded over the elegant china rim as she set down her cup. "Alana, I've considered us friends for over 20 years now, so I hope you'll receive this in the supportive spirit intended. Don't waste another minute on petty wars or ego when life is so fleetingly short. You have miraculously reclaimed everything denied you. Don't squander it for a false illusion of justice or power over others." Her compassionate gaze held mine unwaveringly. "Despite your success, you seem more melancholy than ever. True victory doesn't come from externally validating your worth at the cost of inner peace. Your life is yours now to fill as you choose, without constantly battling ghosts or seeking the meaningless validation of false idols." I stared silently as her words slowly dissolved my feeble inner defenses. The tears I had suppressed these past harsh years suddenly burst forth with unexpected force. Great heaving sobs coursed through me as she enveloped me in her arms. There, let the bitterness flow away," she soothed gently as months of tension flooded out. "Forgive them, forgive yourself. Be free." In that instant, the remaining scales fell away from my eyes at long last. I saw with blinding clarity that in clinging to old pain and trauma as fuel for worldly ambition, I had simply perpetuated the same bleak emotional wasteland I condemned in Dean and Caleb. The phoenix had resurrected yet still dwelled among the ashes, denying herself rebirth into light. No more. Today I would step fully into my new life unchained from the past. The sweet fruit of my success would be savored without vain clinging to transient validation or memories of adversity suffered. I vowed to let compassion fill my heart henceforth, for those who betrayed me, for myself, and for all souls still dwelling in shadow. My remaining years would be a testament to the resilience of the human spirit when we turn from darkness into light. I took a slow, deep breath as I surveyed the familiar surroundings of my sleek corner office one last time. Today was my final day as CEO after selling the remainder of my shares in Turner Biologics. It was time to embark upon the next chapter of my life on my own terms, unshackled from past scars or vain ambition. The acquisition had made me tremendously wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. More importantly, it gave me the freedom to walk away while still young enough to explore impactful new horizons focused on uplifting others. My assistant entered hesitantly, interrupting my reverie. "Mrs. Turner, your ex-husband Dean is here insisting he be allowed to speak with you urgently." I sighed, shaking my head wistfully. Even now, at the bitter end, he persisted, trying to charm or manipulate his way back into my good graces after recognizing the full extent of his folly. Perhaps after years inhabiting bleak emotional wilderness devoid of genuine human bonds, even someone as warped as Dean felt the occasional flicker of regret. "Escort him in, please," I requested calmly. I had nothing left to prove or fear from the faded, humbled man who entered moments later. His expensive attire barely concealed a gaunt, weary frame much aged from heavy drink and despair. This closing conversation was long overdue for both our sakes. Dean cleared his throat awkwardly. "Alana, I know neither words nor deeds can undo the harm I've caused. But for whatever it may be worth now, I wanted you to know I fully comprehend the magnitude of my reprehensible betrayal after you showed me only love and loyalty." His eyes glistened with rare emotion. "When you needed my support most vulnerable, I utterly failed and reveled callously in your downfall. Please believe me when I say few regrets have ravaged me more painfully than this. You deserved far better." I studied Dean's anguished face quietly as he awaited judgment he knew could never fully absolve the past. Had roles been reversed, would I have found compassion sooner without clinging to bitterness and hubris as fueling false strength? Did we not both lose our way, chasing empty validation once affection died? "Dean," I spoke gently at last, "nothing can alter what choices we made when anger and pride blinded us. But having walked long miles in those shoes myself, I understand how easily we forfeit our humanity, grasping at petty wins." I stepped forward and lifted his chin tenderly so our eyes met fully. True victory lies not in worldly wealth or defeated rivals. No, it springs from cultivating understanding and wisdom to halt the cycle of pain. From there flows the peace and freedom to lift up ourselves and others. This I have learned, thanks to the very bitterness and treachery that I once deemed unforgivable. Dean scrutinized my face wordlessly as long-dammed tears streamed down his haggard cheeks. I clasped his hands warmly, wordlessly conveying the forgiveness long overdue between us both. Finally, I stepped back, gazing hopefully towards the door where Caleb lingered uncertainly. "My obligations here have ended. A new chapter begins for us all. Choose wisely where you walk hereon, friends, not just for your own sakes, but for those who need your light." With an encouraging smile, I turned away, then without hesitation or backward glance. The limousine waiting below whisked me towards tropical azure waters, and the blank canvas awaiting my vision for a new future, centered not on vainglory but service. For this precious chance to paint life anew, I owed immeasurable debts to protagonists of adversity now fading into memory. The phoenix had risen irreversibly from sullen embers. Shedding that tattered past with forgiveness, my resurrected wings now bore me gladly aloft towards horizons bright with purpose. Today was the first dawn where victory's glowing warmth finally filled me true from within, and I reveled joyfully in skies no longer darkened by lingering ghosts.